everyone. Thank you for joining us today and for making time in your schedule to fit in this webinar, which we really appreciate. So we're going to be talking a little bit today about wellbeing and about how you can start to fit wellbeing and self-care specifically into your schedule, and how the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app can support with that. So I just wanted to start with introductions. So my name's Nicola Chamberlain. I'm one of the relationship managers here at Thrive Mental Wellbeing. And Dale?
Yes, I am Dale Tomlinson, and I'm also a relationship manager here at Thrive Mental Wellbeing.
Brilliant, thank you. So we do have time at the end for questions and answers. So please feel free, if you can get into the chat version, then you can put them into there and we'll address those at the end of the session. Otherwise, we can do a hands up at the end of the session and you can ask your questions then as well. Excellent. So I'm just going to have a bit of a look at what we're going to cover in the session today. We want to have a look at wellbeing and specifically how you can incorporate activities that promote positive wellbeing, such as self-care activities, for example, into your daily routine. We're also going to understand a little bit more about what self-care is and what that can look like for you as an individual, as well as exploring how you can potentially build healthy habits, ensure that you have enough time to practice self-care regularly, and to make sure that you're making it a priority as well. We're also going to show you that it doesn't need to be onerous or time-consuming, and that with the help of the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app, you can fit wellbeing into your daily routine as easily as you do brushing your teeth.
Brill, thank you, Nicola. I'm really excited for today's session, I have to say, as somebody who doesn't always schedule my life the best. It's been quite an eye-opening experience for me preparing for this session today. So I thought we'd start by, at the obvious point, which is defining what does well-being mean. I think well-being has become quite a tired word in some ways, and it's become a bit of a buzzword. It's been very, getting used all the time, but not necessarily in the right context or understanding what exactly it does mean. Now, the Cambridge Dictionary offers some insights here that, in quite a simple sentence, it's the state of feeling healthy and happy. However, I think it's a little bit more complex than this, and actually, what influences our well-being is different from person to person. But ultimately, the things that feed into this behemoth we call well-being is a complex structure of different inputs, such as our mental well-being, so our mental health, our physical well-being or our physical health, our emotional well-being or our ability to maintain appropriate emotions and positive emotion, our social well-being, and even right now, a big conversation that's happening is our financial well-being. All of these different things feed into this machine we call well-being. They can influence how we feel, how we react to other people, our social connections. And so it's a really important thing to take care of. In fact, research has shown that the more positive our well-being is, the better our outcomes in terms of health, in terms of longevity, job satisfaction, productivity. All of these things are affected by this thing called well-being. And so in particular today, we are going to touch on our mental well-being, as we are Thrive Mental Wellbeing. We'd be remiss not to focus on and stay in our lane and what we know best. But of course, all of these things are interconnected, that if our mental well-being is good, there's a higher likelihood that our physical well-being is good, our financial well-being is better as we're able to control our spending better. And in turn, if our mental well-being isn't so good, then perhaps there's other things that are affected as well. And so managing our mental well-being has a really big impact on our overall well-being. In short, you can call well-being the act of feeling good, feeling satisfied in our lives and functioning well. And so how do we support our well-being? Well, there's many different aspects to well-being, and in particular, I'm going to talk about how these influence our mental well-being. But on the screen, you can see a number of different things. I think five different things which we've picked out, which have a really big influence on our well-being and can help support positive mental well-being. And so I'm going to talk about each of these just briefly before passing over to my colleague Nicola. So how do we support our well-being? Well, firstly, the first one we picked out is connection. Now, humans are social animals. It's always been important to us as a species to have a tribe that we belong to, a group that we feel comfortable in. In fact, if you're aware of any psychology, and something I learned about at university in my course was around Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, Maslow was a psychologist back in the 1940s, 1950s, who did some research into what those basic needs of humans are. And starting at the bottom rung was the very basics: oxygen, water, food, sustenance to keep our biological machine going. Above that was security and safety. So, for a human need is to not be attacked, not be physically hurt. And only just above that is that social connection, belonging. And so it's as intrinsic to people as food, water, safety, is this connection with other people. And we find in individuals who perhaps through either deliberate or accident are isolated more socially, they tend to have worse well-being. Now, this obviously isn't the case for all people. Some people love their own company, right? But generally speaking, those who find themselves more isolated, lonely, or have less of a social connection, their well-being struggles. And so there's many ways in which we can connect with other people to improve our well-being. It could be at work, where we're working on a project together and we've got great synergy and we're all pulling together towards the same goal. And I think here at Thrive, for example, we have a great example of that, where we're all really passionate about mental well-being and supporting other people. And even though we don't always agree on everything, we're all pulling towards that same goal. And it feels very satisfying to connect with a group of people like that. It could be, within our families or within social circles with friends. In particular, I'm a bit of a foodie. I always feel happiest when I'm sat at a dinner table eating with my family. I feel a great sense of connection there. And even other smaller things like our hobbies and our interests. For example, World Cup is on right now, and maybe you're sick of hearing about the World Cup, but I do feel that people have a bit more to talk about, a bit more of a connection when there's this shared thing that we're all pulling towards. Maybe it's that we want England to win the World Cup, for example, and there's that connection there that gives people something to talk about, and that's social belonging to a particular cause. And so connection is really, really important. Activity, being active, also is a common one you hear a lot about. We hear about the physical health benefits of being active, of building muscle strength, lowering body fat percentages, and all these different things that's really good for us physically. And sometimes we almost forget what we are. In fact, I was listening to a podcast the other day with a psychiatrist, and he referred to humans in some ways as species atypical, and that sometimes we kind of forget what we are, that we've been evolving for millions of years through all sorts of different subspecies of what we are now through this primate line, where we're animals that thrive on physical exercise. And you can see it in children, for example. My 3-year-old physically cannot sit still. He's just like he's bursting to be running around or kicking around. Last night when I tried to settle him for bed, he was just banging his head on the pillow just because he had some energy to burn. And we are very active animals. And that activity is so important because it activates certain nervous systems and hormones that enable us to feel good. I don't know if you've ever done a good run or a good session at the gym, and how you feel afterwards is just really satisfied that you've burned some energy and that you've activated some of these happy hormones that can influence your mood. And so being active is really important. And we recommend sort of anywhere between sort of 25 to 30 minutes of moderate exercise per day. So, something like walking, for example. I'm really lucky that I have a dog who drags me out for about an hour a day, which is where I get my happy hormones from, going for a nice walk with my dog up in the North Yorks moors where I live. Or if you want to do something more intensive, perhaps 3 times a week of some more intensive interval training. I squeeze some 5-a-side football in myself to help with that activity as well. The next thing that we want to quickly touch on is taking notice. And this is linked to that word, which again is becoming quite popular, mindfulness, of being more aware and more conscious of the activities that we're doing. And I might wonder how this can help support our well-being, but I think often we do find ourselves today in 2022 as this sort of species atypical group who don't necessarily do things that humans are wired to do all the time, that we often do a lot of things on autopilot, that we're not always paying attention to what we're doing. If it's, and Nicola mentioned brushing our teeth, is what a simple thing it is, but when was the last time you actually noticed yourself brushing your teeth? I actually have a friend who's a dentist, and she said that she finds that people only start noticing teeth brushing when they've got tooth decay, and suddenly they need to do something about it. And it becomes this big thing that you've got to make sure they floss to get the mouthwash in and all those things. And in many ways, how often do we take notice of the things we're doing unless something goes wrong? I'm terrible for driving the car, for example. I can get in the car and 20 minutes later, I have no idea how I got to where I ended up, because I'm lost in my thoughts. I'm on autopilot and I'm not in a state of flow where I'm really focusing on the activity I'm doing and enjoying it. And so we're going to touch on how we can use mindfulness to improve our focus and to allow ourselves to have a more wholesome experience in our lives as we focus and really enjoy the activities that we do, even the mundane. And we'll touch on how the Thrive app can also support with that towards the end of the session. The last two things I'm going to quickly touch on are just learning and compassion, as well as an entity that can improve our well-being. Now, learning, as I said, it all hooks back into this idea that, sometimes we forget who we are as humans. And as a species, look what we've created, right? That I'm sat now in this virtual room talking to 130 people around the UK who I've never met through this sort of metal and plastic box, which has a camera in it, which allows me to communicate to all these people, because we are problem solvers as a species, right? That we find ways to learn, to improve, to make things more efficient, to make them better. And so learning is a lifelong exercise that we're programmed to do, to problem solve. And in learning, we can find a lot of enjoyment. In fact, a few weeks ago, we had a little bit of a relationship manager get together in the Thrive team, and we talked about some of the values that we have. What do we really value in our lives? And one of the things that I said was continual learning. And I noticed that everyone in the virtual room was like, yes, that's a really good one. Because the more we learn, the more satisfied we become with the activities we can then suddenly do, and these problems we now learn to solve. In fact, recently I've just moved house and had a lot of jobs I've had to do in this new house, lots of things to be fixed, lots of new things to be installed. And while it's not been unstressful, a few swear words might have slipped out the mouth when I've hurt myself or done something wrong. The ultimate satisfaction I've got out of learning these skills has been well worth the endeavor and improved my overall well-being. And lastly, as I said, is giving, is compassion. And this links back into that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that social belonging. And a huge aspect of belonging is empathy and compassion. And whether that be giving of materials to people who need them, or giving of time, of our empathy and sympathy. Being socially connected with other people, expressing care for other people. I think very rarely you walk away from that situation and feel rubbish and feel like you've not fulfilled anything meaningful. And actually that social connection imbued with charity and compassion helps create a great environment for the development of strong well-being. And all of these things are really important. And it seems like there's lots of plates we suddenly have to spin. But this all comes down to self-care. Doing these activities is an act of self-care. And so I'm going to pass over to Nicola, who's going to talk a little bit about what self-care means and how we can actually use this to improve our lives.
Yeah, thanks for that, Dale. And thanks for kind of summarising those 5 ways to well-being. And hopefully when we're talking about self-care, you'll be able to see how some of those elements actually fit into some of the things we do for self-care naturally, and how that contributes overall to your well-being. So you can see from the screen here that the World Health Organization defines self-care specifically as the ability of individuals, families, and communities to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. So essentially, self-care can include everything that relates to staying both physically and mentally healthy. So it can include things like hygiene, nutrition, seeking medical care when needed. So Dale mentioned going to the dentist if something's starting to hurt. So all those kind of things fall into self-care. But it's also about the steps that you can take as an individual to manage some of those stresses in your life, and to start to think about and look after your own health and well-being. So in order to practice self-care, you need to check in with yourself and kind of work out how you're doing and work out what your body's asking for and what you need. So some people use self-care to deal with particularly difficult news stories or stressful events in their life, whereas others will practice it more regularly and use it to just maintain their happiness on a daily basis. It doesn't mean the same thing for everyone. So we're all unique, we're all individuals. So different people will adopt different self-care practices. What works for me won't work for somebody else. And I think it's really important to remember that your own definition of self-care can change over time. So it's really important to keep checking in with yourself. But I think one misconception that I think we need to clear up straight away is that self-care is not synonymous with self-indulgence, and it is certainly not selfish. So self-care essentially means looking after yourself so that it can enable you to be healthy. You know, you can be well, you can do your job, and you can do all those things that you need to and want to accomplish in a day. So thinking then about how you support your self-care, we've got a great Slido poll on the screen here, which hopefully you've used before. If not, then all you need to do is to scan the QR code that's on your screen if you've got a smartphone, or you can join by going to slido.com and inputting that unique number, which is 1896596. And what will happen here is as you start to input some of the activities that you practice in order to maintain your own self-care, we'll start to see a nice little word cloud on the screen here that incorporates some of those activities. So I know, for example, for me, there you go, going to the gym, reading, brilliant. Running, yes, gym, a lot of exercise on there, which is great because you're looking after both your physical and your mental health there.
I'm feeling shamed by all the exercise here.
I'm not going to lie, I was about to say, remember that everything doesn't work for everybody. I, for one, really struggle with exercise and I don't actually get enjoyment from it, but I love that reading and walking I can get on board with. So I love that those two are up there. Cuddling my dog. So yeah, pets are a great way as well to look after your self-care. Anyone that's got a pet will know the impact that they can have on your well-being and how just spending time with them can act as self-care as well. Crafts, art, yep, I crochet. So crochet is a massive one for me for self-care. I start to notice if I've not done that in a while, I tend to do it daily. Listening to music, journaling. Journaling is actually a really good one and it's become much more popular over the last couple of years, but sometimes it's really good to get out of your head some of those things that are in there. It's a really good reflective practice.
Yeah, I journal. I really enjoy it. I was sort of raised on the conception that journaling is what teenage girls do. And then I started doing it and realized, actually, this is brilliant. And this is the internal monologue that I needed to express.
Exactly. I think there's some great things here. And what I like here is that there's a mix of things that you might do more frequently, you know, so you walking your dog, for example, as you mentioned, is a day or twice daily, sometimes 3 times daily activity, you know, going for a walk, listening to music, reading, things you'll do quite regularly. But then there's other big things that you do as well when you need a bit more self-care, you know, as people have mentioned before, you know, spa days or going away for an evening or even holidays. Something as big as that is still a form of self-care. So I think it's really important that you're getting a really good mix of some of these smaller day-to-day activities, but also the bigger ones where you can as well. And working out how you can incorporate your self-care activities into those. So just look at some more quizzes. That's a good one. I like that.
I love the quiz. Yeah, that's a great one.
Oh no, that's great. Time with my partner. Yep, I find that really helps with me as well. That's my safe space. That's my downtime. And I mean, time where you're completely switched off and spending time together. Rather than both sat there on your phones, which I know some couples will do. I'm not exempt from that. Yeah, there's some great ones on there. And what we'll do is we'll keep this poll open as well, so that you can keep adding to that. And then I'm sure we'll be able to incorporate that into, you know, a slide deck for you or a slide that we can send around as a follow-up, just to give you some more ideas of different things you could do if you actually struggle with how to manage your own self-care. But maybe you could have a go at some of these things and see if they work for you. Oh, I've just noticed that somebody's put smells, and that's really interesting because we're going to come on to how smells can play into self-care and how they can make you a bit more aware a bit later on in the session. Brilliant. So we'll move away from that now, but we'll leave that open so that people can still contribute. So having a think about some of those activities that you mentioned on the previous slide, big and small, I just want you to have a bit of a think now individually about how often you make the time to do those things. And just, you know, picture a little sticker of your face or something and place it somewhere on the bar in front of you. And hopefully most of you are edging towards the right of that bar. If you're edging more towards the left, that's absolutely fine. Hopefully there'll be some useful information in this session to help you move a little bit further over and get you practicing self-care a bit more frequently. You know, is it something that you do daily, weekly? Or actually, if you're down near the never or the monthly or less, are you actually finding that you're getting to a point where you're near burnout or where you're really struggling before you actually undertake some of these self-care activities? Because I think That can be really easy to do. I think in today's world where everything feels busy and everything's a priority, it can be really difficult to feel like prioritizing self-care is important. Like I say, that whole idea that potentially self-care is selfish, or that you're not doing everything that you should be, we need to kind of scrap that idea here so that we can start to regularly take care of ourselves, and then ultimately we'll be better able to react to things that happen in our lives. You know, we'll start to experience reduced stress. Our immune system should improve, and we can have increased productivity and higher self-esteem, which I know that Dale alluded to when he was talking about the 5 ways to well-being. So I'm just going to pass you back over to Dale now, and he's going to talk to you about some of the ways that we can actually start to embed self-care into our routines.
Absolutely. and Nicola mentioned something that's really important a couple of slides ago, which is around checking in with yourself. Now, when I think of sort of this check-in process, I like to think of a car. And I do a lot of driving. I live quite rural in North Yorkshire. And so to get to anywhere is at least half an hour as standard. And so I spend a lot of time driving my car. And in thinking about this check-in, I would think of it in the same way as I would if I was planning on going for a long journey, I'd make sure everything's working on my car. That, you know, I'd make sure the tires are okay, the tire pressure light isn't on. I've got that little, in fact, it makes it really easy nowadays because you've got on the dashboard, you've got a pressure light, you've got an engine warning light, you've got a heating, a temperature gauge that tells you all the things that could be wrong with the car. And if I was going to go on a long journey, I'd probably take a glance there before I set off. And then I'd say, okay, well, it's safe to go. And in the same way, we should be doing that similar exercise with ourselves. We should be looking for those warning lights as they're flashing on, telling us that perhaps there's something that isn't quite right and we need to fix. You know, I wouldn't drive down to London all the way from where I am in Scarborough on a flat tire. If the tire pressure light was on, I would probably do something about it before I took on that arduous task. And checking in with yourself follows that exact same idea that, you know, actually, if we've got something coming up in our lives that perhaps will take some it'll cause perhaps some pressure and some difficulty, we need to ensure that we're in a position to be able to deal with that and to be able to manage it sustainably. And so hopefully some of these statements on the screen here can direct you towards some questions you might want to ask yourself, or, you know, some symptoms or issues you might want to look for in this check-in. That sometimes it is as easy as a warning light as, come on, you know, if we're feeling particularly stressed, we often feel some physical manifestations of that. It might be stress headaches, it might be stomach cramps, it might be sweating, it might be panicking, blood pressure, all of those things. Those are some things that give us some really clear warning lights. And actually, as we learn what these things look like, as sort of divvied up in the screen here, and understand what actually some of these things indicate, it helps us understand what those different lights, what these different warning lights are. So checking in with yourself, looking over some of the issues you're experiencing, you know, actually, are you feeling quite withdrawn? Are you feeling frustrated? Perhaps you're having some intrusive thoughts that aren't helpful to you. Recognize these as a warning light they are, and use that as the first step towards self-care, towards either accessing further help should you need it, or perhaps reevaluating some of the things you do in your life to be able to manage some of these stresses as they arise. So establishing that self-care routine in response to that check-in is really important. And having that check-in is the most useful first step, because you know what warning lights are coming on, and you know what you need to deal with. And so building a self-care routine, which is solution focused, which fits into your lifestyle, into the values that you have, is really important, which is why it can be difficult for somebody else just to give you a self-care routine and say, there you go, good luck. I know when you go on YouTube and any influencer will say, this is how I start my day and made my success. But actually, I'm not in favor of getting up at 4 a.m, like some people claim to do, and going to the gym for 2 hours and having a special kind of disgusting green looking smoothie to start my day. That's not self-care for me. And my values are different. And so the self-care routine I build actually revolves around what works for me. And so in building that self-care routine, we can ask ourselves some of these questions on the screen. You know, what actually gives me energy? What takes it away? What is a big energy sap for me? What motivates me? What makes me most content? What gives me strength and resolve to get through difficult situations? And as we do this exercise, we can start to retune our day. We can start to look at ways in which, you know, thinking about schedules, for example, which we're going to touch on shortly, thinking about how we can actually fit things into busy schedules and how we can adapt things so that we can perhaps tick off a few different aspects of self-care and well-being in one. So one example in my life, for example, is that I really do neglect exercise, as I touched on. I do neglect it. I do enjoy playing five-a-side football with my friends, occasionally when we get the time around sort of busy family schedules. But to be honest, I often feel a bit of guilt, like Nicola touched on, in that if I want to go to the gym, I feel guilt that, mine and my wife's working hours are opposite. And so I affect her work if I go, or I have to get babysitters. And it can feel quite complicated sometimes to actually be able to build a self-care routine that works. But actually, we sat down as a family, we talked about what goals we had, what values we have. We really love being outdoors and we wanted to exercise more. And so we combined the two. And actually, we've built some family time around our exercise, hiking, bike riding, and making sure that we still do these things regular enough for them to be that physical health self-care, but also tick the boxes of the modern rigors of family life as well. But a self-care routine, I think many of us probably have been there before. We've downloaded Strava, for example, and we thought, right, I am running every day. I am doing this. I'm going to be king of the world. I'm going to be the world's not going to be able to keep up with me by the time I'm done. And we'll do the first week, and I'll get to the Tuesday in the second week, and it's a cold morning, and we're like, no, I'm not doing it today. I can't do it today. And it ends up petering out as quickly as it arose, because a lot of the self-care routines we try and build are not always sustainable. It's flash in the pan, right, I'm motivated to do this right now, and it peters out. And so we're going to talk a little bit now about how we can make it a bit more, make it more sticky, make it actually, be around in our routine and not just be something that appears once in a blue moon.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jay. I appreciate that and completely feel you on the Strava thing. The amount of times I've done a week and a half of running and then given up. Yeah. But no, I think it is about making it sustainable. And there's a reason that habits aren't always sustainable and don't always last. And we're going to look into that now. So we've already established that self-care can have a really positive effect on your health and your outlook. But it does require a commitment or intention to actually invest in your well-being. So all habits begin with a choice to engage in a particular behavior. So in this case, we're looking at choosing to, prioritize and practice self-care, whatever that looks like for you. And actually, you might not know this, but on average, it takes 66 days to create a habit. So consistency is really important here. And the way we can look at that and the process of building and maintaining those habits can be summarized by the 3 R's that you can see on the screen there. So reminder, routine, and reward. And they're a loop. So if one of those doesn't happen, it can essentially stop the habit from forming, which is what we don't want to do when we're trying to make something sustainable. So the reminder step specifically consists of cues. And what they do is they trigger the brain to initiate a behavior. So for example, if you want to, let's use Dale's example, if you want to run at 7 a.m. every morning, you might set an alarm on your phone to get you up, and then you might set an alarm on your phone for when you want to do that activity. You might also, for instance, if you want to be more mindful, you might put a post-it note on your kettle to remind you to actually, when you drink your cup of tea, to drink it a little bit more mindfully. And what those reminders do is they act as information for your brain that predict that you're going to get a reward. So the reward for the run, for example, being the endorphins, and the reward for the tea drinking more mindfully is that you get a better experience, which I'm going to have a look in a bit more detail now. So because our minds are constantly analysing our internal and external environment for where rewards can be, and that includes primary rewards, so things that are on that hierarchy of needs that Dale mentioned, so things like food and water that we need. And then there's secondary rewards, which include, a sense of personal satisfaction or relief. So in this case, for example, taking the cup of tea, mindfully drinking that cup of tea will allow you to savor its taste, to feel its temperature, and ultimately make it much more enjoyable to drink. And that's your reward. So by using that reminder on the kettle, you're reminded of how nice that tea will be to drink, and that will lead to the craving to make you do it. So we know we'll benefit from it, so we're more likely to do it, and then we're more likely to do it consistently, which then builds it into a routine. So essentially what we're saying here is that every craving that we have as a human is linked to that desire which is what changes our internal state. So the rewards of the end goal of every habit are what satisfies our desires and provides pleasure, which is why a self-care activity has got to be something that's relevant for you and something that gives you energy rather than saps your energy and that brings you joy. And what that does is it allows our brain to detect like our useful actions from our useless ones. And because it performs that endless loop, if you don't do one of those steps, that will, as I say, result in the habit not being formed and therefore making it more difficult to create a daily routine. So what can we do then? Well, how can we make this something that is easy to fit into our routines and that doesn't impact too much negatively and doesn't become another task that needs to be done? So we're all busy and feel like there perhaps isn't enough time in the day for self-care and that it has to be time consuming, but we've already discussed some of the ways it doesn't. But we need to think about how we could spend our time doing things that are a little bit more useful and that better support our well-being. So you can see here how your day could look. And I'm sure we're all guilty of having days that look like this. I do, that's for sure. But what you can see on the right-hand side now is a day that puts in quite excessively some of the ways in which we can make changes, but it gives you a really good example of how you can fit easy changes into your self-care routine. So for a start, could you think about, maybe removing that social media scroll that I'm sure most of us are guilty of? You're sat there and you've got 5 minutes, so you'll get out your phone and scroll, Instagram or LinkedIn or whichever is your social media platform of choice. But could we actually do something a bit more wholesome? Could you, take out that book you're reading and read another chapter, or potentially treat yourself to a long bath? Breakfast. How many times do you sit and if you don't skip breakfast, eat breakfast at your desk while you're loading up your emails? Actually, if we have breakfast before work, maybe start with a little aroma meditation with your coffee, which I'll talk about a bit later. It just gives you a much nicer start to the day and makes you much better prepared to face the tasks that you've got in your day. Lunchtime as well. Can we get out and about at lunchtime, move away from our desks a little bit? A 5-minute walk around the block and then just eating your lunch away from your desk space can make a huge difference and really give you a fresh focus so that you can tackle your afternoon. Maybe you could switch to your TV one evening for another activity you enjoy. So, exercise if you like to exercise, or if not, then perhaps a hobby. One of those things that you suggested in the Slido poll, could you potentially change TV for one of those a few nights a week? Or what about social media detox? I've done one of them for a weekend before and it is absolutely brilliant. You just don't look at any social media apps, or you can completely take them off the phone if you want to. And I think the key thing here is that it doesn't have to all happen at once. So you don't have to have a day like the right every day. You can make small changes regularly enough that you'll start to automatically prioritize those activities because they restore your energy and they support your well-being, and therefore you feel better for it. So let's have a look then at some of the ways that the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app can actually support in making self-care part of your routine. And Dale's going to kick us off with this one.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app has been developed by two consultant level clinicians, a consultant psychiatrist and a consultant clinical psychologist. And it's been built with the idea that actually there is so much resources within the world of mental health care and psychology that so many people don't have access to due to a lack of awareness. But actually, these are things that you can do yourselves. A lot of these things can be self-administered using the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app. And so the research that went into the app has come out with a load of sessions that we're going to talk about that enable you to make subtle changes to your self-care routine, to allow you to be able to perhaps elevate activities you're already doing and have a higher level of enjoyment when you're doing them, to be able to take care perhaps of some of the low-hanging fruit of well-being, such as our sleep, for example, or improving our reaction to stress. And that using some of these resources we're going to touch on enables you to build a self-care routine, to do some of those things that Nicola just talked about on the last screen, where we can switch out activities quite easily using the resources available within the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app, which has been designed to improve your mental well-being. And so we're going to talk about a few of these activities and how you can start using them from today to be able to improve your overall well-being by just doing a few little substitutions within your life. And so the first on the screen that you can see there is cognitive behavioural therapy, also known as CBT. You've probably heard of CBT before because it's the most commonly used form of therapy in the UK, especially in response to things like anxiety and depression. That if you were to go see your GP about struggling with any of those things, the likelihood is that you will be put onto a CBT course. Now, the CBT course within the app is designed to help you manage the relationship between your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, which enables you to take more control over how you think, how you feel, and how you act, to be able to intervene when negative thoughts arise and to stop them spilling over into an emotional response that perhaps might not be useful to you, that actually might cause more harm to yourself. And so learning the principles of CBT is generally done in a situation where somebody is unwell. However, there is a lot of research which shows that CBT as a resource is just as useful for individuals who are well, who want to build personal resilience, improve their own self-care, be prepared for the setbacks that are inevitably going to arise as life happens, right? And so CBT is a brilliant resource to improve your overall well-being, to be able to have perhaps better relationships with your family or friends as you learn to manage your thoughts better and learn to have perhaps a more pragmatic response to setbacks. And so CBT is a brilliant preventative technique, and it's a brilliant remedy for those experiencing things like intense stress, anxiety, or depression. Now, the CBT course that we've designed fits perfectly into any self-care routine because it's so easy to use and accessible. Whereas CBT often usually sits behind a gatekeeper. And by that, I mean you've got to go through a process, perhaps within a clinical setting, to be able to get access to CBT, to be able to sit down with a CBT practitioner, either within the context of the NHS or within perhaps the private sector or whatever the relevant regional variant of a healthcare system is for you. And then it usually sits behind a paywall or a gatekeeper to be able to access the benefits of CBT. And it's usually a program available for people who are unwell, who don't get to have the benefits of it before they actually need it. Whereas the CBT course that we've designed sits within the Thrive app. It's accessible easily, irrespective of what position you find yourself in with your mental well-being. The CBT course is broken down into mini bite-sized sessions as opposed to the standard sort of hour-long face-to-face with the CBT practitioner, where you can actually learn the basics really quickly and actually at a schedule that works for you. So instead of sitting, if you're on the tube or you're on the train or the bus commuting to work, instead of just sticking a random Spotify playlist on, you can very easily pop your headphones in and start doing some CBT, learning these principles and allowing yourself to get access to this resource in a way which fits into your schedule really easily. If you're sat, plodding away at work or taking a coffee break, again, quite easily you can fit in a couple of sessions of our sort of 3 to 8 minute long CBT sessions, which are short enough to be accessible, but full of really, really useful resources to be able to help improve your relationship with your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, and to allow you to perhaps move on from anything that you're struggling with. And so CBT is a really effective tool that you can use in this sort of 24/7 accessible resource to be able to build your knowledge of CBT and to actually, once you've completed the course, go back and complete it again, fulfill the goals set for you by the Thrive app that are relevant to the situation that you find yourself in, and use it as a continual companion for your own self-care. And so that's the CBT course, which is a brilliant learning course, something that I've completed a couple of times myself in my own personal Thrive usage, which has helped me improve my relationship, especially with my kids, where I'd express frustration at them. Or if they'd been misbehaving and I was stressed at work, my kids would bear the brunt of my frustration. And actually doing CBT helped me to get into a better position, and it slotted right into my own busy lifestyle. But in terms of other resources you can use for an in-the-moment fix, CBT is brilliant as a learning resource, and you learn how to cope with those issues. But in the moment of distress, I wouldn't say, pop your headphones in and do a CBT session, because it's more of a learning resource. It's great when you get yourself out of that feeling and start to apply those principles to the issues you're facing. But something like a meditation or a mindfulness session is a brilliant tool that you can utilize in the moment of distress or anxiety, or actually perhaps you just need to relax and need to take care of yourself for a few minutes after a busy day at work. Mindfulness and meditation has been proven to actually reroute how sort of the nervous system works, reroute your brain and your thought patterns as you become more mindful and become more deliberate in your actions. And so within the Thrive app, we have a wide range of meditations and mindfulness sessions, which as we sort of illustrated on those daily routines, you can slot in quite easily to the things you're already doing. For example, as Nicola said, if you're having a cup of tea, well, why don't you do an aroma meditation with it, where you focus on the smell of the tea, the warmth of the cup in your hand, and you pay attention just to the sensory experience of it, which we rarely do. We often just try and just pour it in and get back to what we're doing, and actually we miss the point that we've made the tea for a reason. And so doing something like an aroma meditation with your tea, you're making your tea anyway. All it's doing is just enhancing the experience that you're already doing slightly to improve mindfulness and awareness. Or it could be that you want to get out of the office and you could do a mindful walk, where you can pop your headphones in and go on a mindful walk that's within the meditations section of the app, which encourages you to pay attention to perhaps a route that you might walk all the time, to pick out new features that perhaps you haven't noticed, to pay attention to the wind on the leaves, or the general hum of the noise around you. And that in doing these mindfulness sessions, you start to enjoy those little things a bit more as you become more mindful, more focused, and notice the things that we allow to pass by on autopilot. And so I personally really love doing some of these mindfulness sessions. I do them with my boys, a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old as well. And it's been a great activity we've done together. And hopefully to help them learn these skills from a young age, so that they don't have to wait till they're 30 like me to learn how to actually focus and not just be distracted continually. And so, yeah, the meditation sessions within the app, there's a wide range of different resources within those mindfulness sessions that can really help build focus, but not take much time out of your day at all.
Thanks, Dale. Now, deep muscle relaxation is another one of those tools that is really easy to build into your day, and you could see it just before bed on the daily routine examples that we had. It's actually one of my favorite tools within the app. It's really good for releasing tension and for reducing stress. So the way that it works is a much more body-based technique. So it tends to be better for you if you struggle with things like breath work and meditation. I know that I do. I really struggle with meditation. Perhaps that's why I find this one, better for me, because I relate more to the way that it works, but also because it is more physical, it can be more popular with men as well. So if you're male and you've tried things like calm breathing and meditation, it's not for you, maybe give this a go and see how it supports you. But essentially, during a deep muscle relaxation session, what will happen is you'll be guided to tense and relax different muscle groups one at a time. So you start at the top of your head and work your way down your body to the tip of your toes. And what happens is that by tuning into that heightened sensation when you relax a muscle group, not only does it relax your body and release that tension physically, but you will also find that it starts to relax your mind too. For that reason, it's great to do before bed, not good to do when you're getting up, especially, if you've got a first thing in the morning meeting. I would not recommend deep muscle relaxation. It is there to switch you off rather than focus you and tune you in. So as mentioned here, there are lots of benefits, but like I say, I really want to highlight that effect on sleep. And there have been a lot of studies carried out around deep muscle relaxation and intense muscle relaxation that highlight its ability to not only help you actually fall asleep and switch off, but also to experience a higher quality of sleep. So you can just put the phone on the bedside table, play the session from there. I actually have ADHD and I find that my mind is busiest at night. So if, like me, you find the second your head hits the pillow, then every thought on his dog is going through your head. I would strongly suggest trying deep muscle relaxation and trying to schedule it in every night before sleep. It just helps to clear your mind of the stresses of the day and the things that are come the next day, and it just helps you to drift off without the racing mind you might have otherwise. So a challenge is to set aside 12 minutes before bed tonight and give it a go and see if it helps you. And if it does, have a think about, could you actually keep this as part of your bedtime routine, especially if you're noticing a positive impact on your well-being. And as well as techniques in the app, there's also a lot of ways in which the app works that can help you fit well-being into your routine, like we discussed earlier. And Dale's just going to touch on some of those now. No, he's not. Sorry, I'm going to touch on some of them now, and then Dale's going to pick up at the end of them. So hopefully you'll still remember the 3 R's from earlier. So that was reminder, routine, and reward. So 3 points if you remembered those. And the app can actually help with all of these steps. So you can see on the screen there an image of the goals section within the app. And what happens there is that you're presented with those reminders that we talked about to help you build the routine, and you will also receive rewards within the app for completing goals and sessions. So because the app is intuitive, it will help keep you on track, and it will give you goals based on the activities that you tend to use the most within the app and how you use it. So those goals in themselves act as a reminder to complete some of the self-care activities, not only in the app, but outside of it too. You know, you can see there's an exercise related goal in there and a sleep one, and there's also some socializing ones built into the app. And you can actually set a reminder for those to go for a certain time. So that acts as your cue to complete that activity. The creation of those goals and the reminders that come with them should help you to form that routine and make looking after your well-being as second nature. As we've said, brushing your teeth or making your bed and the other things that you do autonomously without thinking. We also want the goals to be really specific to you. So you can actually change the goals and make them more relevant to, you know, your specific self-care activities. And the reason behind that is we want to make them attainable. So you are actually rewarded for any goals that you complete with Thrive points, which you can use in one of the games in the app. So what we want to do is create that reward system so that it closes that loop and helps you to form those healthy habits. So now Dale's going to talk you through some of the other features in the app as well and how they can support it in that process of creating a routine.
Absolutely. And as we said earlier, a lot of this goes back to that initial check-in with yourself, that without doing that exercise, it can be very difficult to understand what your needs are, what self-care you need to administer to yourself, you know, what warning lights are on the dashboard. If you're not looking at the dashboard, you'll never know. And so the Thrive app has a mechanism built within it, which allows you to do that check-in process and guide you through it if you don't know where to start. If you're not sure, you know, what questions you need to be asking yourself, what things you need to be looking for, then the Thrive app can help you do that. It can identify issues for you and take you through a clinical screening called, well, two particular questionnaires called the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7. And these screening tools are there to screen for the symptoms of anxiety or depression. And going through this checkup allows you to identify issues that perhaps you're experiencing within your with that you were unaware of or didn't have an understanding of, and allow you to identify them and then set you goals as Nicola just talked about, based on the intuitive AI that sits within the app, which takes you towards goals based on your preferences, based on what you actually perform within the app. And so allowing yourself to open up to a completely confidential, anonymous space within the app allows you to be able to get access to these clinical screening tools, allows you to actually get a big reward for doing that individualized check-in. And where it can be quite hard to perhaps check in verbally with another person, where we perhaps might feel an element of social pressure to not fully open up, or perhaps it might feel like we might be pushing our problems onto other people if we open up to them and have a check-in with another individual, and that might stop us from doing that. Doing it within the context of the Thrive app allows you to be able to do that in a way which feels anonymous, confidential, takes away those barriers from checking in that we often put in front of ourselves. And so doing this checkup will get you set some goals in line with your mood, and can actually open up the pathway to help seeking and other support should you need it. And all of this is captured within
Sorry, Dale, just to jump in, we just had some messages on the chat. Apologies, there was a typo on that last slide. So it is the PHQ-9 for depression and the GAD-7 for anxiety, just for clarity. So apologies for that. Sorry, Dale, carry on.
Amazing, it's got through 4 hands and we've all missed it. We need to do more self-care and more focused and in flow when we're building these slides, Nicola. That's what it is. Absolutely, yeah. And thanks for pointing that out. And the overall goal of completing these check-ins is that it allows you to have a longer term progress report, which you have access to, which is, again, completely confidential, anonymous, that you, the user, actually own the data that sits behind. So this is your own progress report. This is your own check-in report, which allows you to look back over time and to look at perhaps what influenced your moods over certain days. You know, if that every Monday you've got, like, maybe Monday's not a good example because you're back at work after the weekend, but if every Thursday you've got low mood and perhaps you're expressing certain things that you're experiencing within those check-ins, it allows you to look for the patterns. It allows you to have an enhanced look at your own well-being, to be able to pick out some key stresses that are affecting your well-being, to be able to build up some resilience to them. It allows you to look at what happens on the good days and perhaps try to incorporate more of that into the days where you're struggling a little bit, to allow you to use this data for your own good, to build that self-care routine that's based actually on data, which is actually based on your own data, individualized to you, which you can allow yourself to use in a way to benefit yourself, rather than having a thought and forgetting about it a week later and doing the exercise mentally without ever writing it down. You can keep it in a space which is secure and useful to you. The Thrive app also has a range of resources which can help you build this self-care routine in line with different issues you're experiencing. And this sits within our Thrive in 5 psychoeducational series, which has been designed and delivered by our therapists and business psychologists here at Thrive. And these Thrive in 5 sessions can help you deal with all sorts of issues, get you onto the pathway perhaps to recovery with certain problems, and help you design some self-care routines that really work for you and give you some knowledge and understanding at the start of that process of building a self-care routine. So, for example, some of our sessions cover things like addiction, such as sort of learning to empower yourself, how to thrive at work if you are struggling in the workplace. And actually, we've got some guides on building self-care routines within our 5 steps to well-being as well as our positive mindset sessions, which can help you learn how to have a more positive mindset in the face of setbacks, and to be able to, especially when trying to build a self-care routine, we can often be a bit negative if we fail to do the things that we were aiming to do. And I've been there. I felt rubbish about myself and very self-depreciating because I gave up on Strava after 3 days, and I taught myself down. And actually being able to adopt a more positive mindset and celebrate the 2 days I did do, it makes you more likely to actually continue to build your self-care routine and the opportunity to improve the things you want to improve in your life. So Nicola is the teacher here. She's going to set us your homework, everybody.
Thanks, Dale. So yes, a bit of homework for everybody, but hopefully it's nice homework and not something that you're going to hate me for doing. So what I want you to do tonight is just spend 1 hour just doing something for yourself. It can be anything that you want, providing it brings you joy and that it's just for you. And we'll also like you to download the Thrive app, which we'll come on to in a minute. We'll put the slide up for that. But we also have a self-care bingo card, which we're going to send around after the session, which has got a range of different self-care activities you can have a go at and see how many you can cross off in the coming weeks, and maybe you'll find a new self-care activity that works for you. We are going to open the floor open for questions now. Can I just ask Dale that you skipped the QR code slide, because we've had a few requests for that in the chat. So while we go through the questions, we can leave this up on the slide so that you can access the app. And actually that ties in really nicely with the first question that we've got there. So we've had somebody ask, how do I know if my business has an activation code for the app? They recommend these courses, but I cannot access the app without an activation code. It's a really good question. We obviously know who has codes, but it might be worth speaking to your HR or people department or whoever heads up wellbeing within your organization to find out if you have access to the Thrive app, and they'll be able to provide you with your unique access code for your business. But if you have any problems or you can't find the answer, then please do get in touch with us. Dale, Dale's popped his email.
I've popped my email in the chat. If you do have any specific questions about your organization, if you're not sure of your access code or if you've got access, please do pop me an email. It's in the chat there, and we can take you through getting logged in. And Charlotte, she says, if I leave the company I work for in the future, will I lose access to Thrive? So essentially Thrive is provided by your organization, and the reason that we work on that model is that we don't believe that the end user should ever have to pay for access to these services. But what does happen if you were to leave an organization is they should provide you with
a flyer to move over to our service that keeps you connected for an additional 3 months once you leave the organisation. I mean, hopefully, if you were to leave, you'd move somewhere where they had access to Thrive. But if not, then please feel free to put them in touch, and we can certainly speak to them about that provision within the business. But ultimately, yes, it is your organisation that would provide that access. Dale, I don't know if you want to take this one. I'm addicted to my phone and social media. Any tips on how to manage that?
Absolutely, yeah. We actually do have a couple of guides here at Thrive about sort of managing your relationship with social media and how you can have a better relationship with it. I'm very much in the camp that social media isn't good or bad in of itself. It's just how we interact with it and how we behave with it and how much we use it that dictates whether it's good or bad in our lives. And so if you'd like to, my email is in that chat. If you'd like to pop me an email over, I can send you over some of our guides we've got about sort of how fostering and building a better relationship with social media, as well as some of the addiction resources we have as well. And there are some sessions within the Thrive app, within that Thrive in 5, that can help with addiction management as well.
And also, I've just seen a message in the chat from Emma, who's after a code for Sartorius. If you can just send Dale an email on his email address, and we'll be able to get that over to you, Emma, if that's okay. Just having a look. Is it easy to reset the user? So you wouldn't be able to reset it for access for another family member, but what you can do is you can use the app with that family member. Or, if you are somebody that has access to the therapy service, for example, then you can speak to therapists about how they can help you support your teenager as well. But no, that's a really, really good question. Bear with me. Dale's popped his chat in again, so that's great. Excellent. Is there any other questions? Feel free, you can pop them in the Q&A, or if you feel comfortable enough, you can raise your hand and you can speak out loud and we can answer them on the spot. I'm aware we've got about 4 minutes left, so we were able to probably take 1 or 2 more questions if anybody's got any. Just
to share, there was a message in the chat earlier that said learning a new skill unrelated to work can be so rewarding, like a hobby, language, or musical instrument. I'm definitely in that camp. I absolutely I speak a couple of languages, which I really enjoy having that skill, and playing music as well is something I really enjoy. So yeah, thank you for your message.
Sorry, we've got a Q&A saying, where is Oliver's email? I can't see it. I'm going to assume you mean Dale's email. So I'm just going to respond to you in that. And we've also had another comment in the Q&A saying, as a former clinician several years in the NHS, I know lots of my patients have found Thrive really helpful in both the reactive and preventative space. As you both said earlier, I cannot stress enough the importance of looking at the content at the earliest possible stage. Yeah, definitely. We know that people are more likely to come and use the Thrive Mental Wellbeing app when they're unwell, but we would fully recommend using it as frequently as you can, really, to really build up the tools that are in there, and so that you know how to use them and how to access them if you need them when you're not in such a good place. So no, that's a really good point. Thank you. And yes, the session will be recorded and it will be hosted on our YouTube channel. I believe the link will probably be sent round with the follow-up email on that one. So you should be provided with the recording for this session. Brilliant. So any other questions? There we go. Somebody sent some links that if you're trying to access through OneSource, I believe you can do. Excellent. Well, if you do have any questions afterwards, Dale's email address is on there. So I know that sometimes it can feel uncomfortable asking questions in a public situation. So feel free to reach out to Dale independently, and we can access any questions that way as well. Just a quick one. My mother is retired. Can she access this as she doesn't work? Unfortunately not. It is available at the moment through workplaces. But again, if you drop an email to Dale, we can have a look into that, and we can see if there is a service that has the app where she could support, because there's lots of different organizations and charities and things that work with us, so please do get in touch. Yes, we're sending the bingo card in the follow-up email, so yeah, please do get as many of those ticked off as you can. Brilliant. Looks like that's it for questions then, and we are perfectly on time, which is absolutely brilliant. Thank you once again, everybody, for joining us. We appreciate that you're all busy, but you've already taken the first step in prioritising your wellbeing by attending this webinar. So hopefully this will be the start of a really positive journey for you. like I say, you will get a follow-up email with any information, including the bingo card. And if you do have any questions, please do reach out to Dale, and Dale and I will be able to field those and answer those as appropriate. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day, and do that deep muscle relaxation tonight. That is strict homework you've got to do to get a better
do your homework. Technically 2 pieces if we include that, but it's all good stuff.
Excellent. Right, we'll end the session there. Thank you so much, everybody, and yeah, wish you all a lovely day and rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.